Thing to be filled.
Interwebs, you're getting a little behind the scenes before I start the musics and get this ball rolling. Got a playlist that I'll link in the link of the description of the episode of this episode.
The episode squared.
That's right. We've got New Orleans street jazz playlist. Welcome to the Zanzizi podcast. It's Rad Dad 2024 in the Rad Dad Kitchen Studios with Nico on the ground eating his kitty crusties. And welcome to season 2, Danger Zone, back into his house. How's it going, brother?
What's up, man? Just been busy hanging out. It's been a long time since I've been on, so glad to be back and doing a
People
little.
missed you. I got messages. I said, that's my brother. I'll get him out of his room. I'll get him down into his man cave, jangle up his Wi-Fi. So
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I don't think anybody's looking for me to come onto your podcast, but I'm glad to be here anyway.
it's true. Sound off in the Instagram, YouTube, whatever. I know you guys hiding out there. You're like, I'm quiet. I like history podcasts, but I don't want to say anything. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. As you can tell by the music, this is the Haunted New Orleans episode. I just went to New Orleans recently. I wanted to do an episode on it because I did one of those crazy trips where I got to go and tour the city with an actual like tour guide ghost expert, supposedly. Ghost City Tours, check it out. It was a lot of fun. Learned quite a bit. There's a lot of history, but I will say there was an interesting moment for me, sir, when I was walking through the main square just past the French Quarter, and I saw a statue of a previous episode, a Mr. Andrew Jackson riding his horse. Well, at least stoically in a statue. But at first I saw it and I was like, that looks like, yep, that's Andrew Jackson. Yep. And there he was. And I got to tell my girls, yeah, I know a few things about Andrew Jackson. Interesting character. Anyway, see those two-parter episodes. We got a new two-parter cooking right now, simmering low heat. It's going to
Do
be,
they have a lot of stuff of Andrew Jackson there in New Orleans? I've never been to New Orleans.
well, when we start with the first bullet point of this episode, I will tell you about the legend of the Andrew Jackson Hotel.
Oh,
It's haunted.
all right. I won't spoil it.
No, no, no. It's all good.
I actually, real quick,
Yeah.
I had to go to Boston for work last week, and I had not listened to the Andrew Jackson episodes. I think we did too. So yeah, and so I listened to them while I was driving.
What'd you
I
think?
should have I should have listened to the Revolutionary War episodes because I was going to Lexington. So um, no, it was good. I recalled a lot of the stuff that we had studied. You know, a lot of this stuff I learn it and forget it, just like I did in college. But yeah, he's an interesting dude.
Indeed. See those episodes. Haunted New Orleans. Well, New Orleans was essentially founded in 1715. NOLA founded. It was a rat trap of Buccaneers, Frenchmen, Spanish, all kinds of hooligans running around. Now, one of the most interesting parts of the tour that I took, our tour guide, Jamie, seek her out. She was fantastic, 5 stars. We went to one of the areas in the French Quarter where you could see kind of like the pillars outside, like where the balcony was. And she pointed this out to us, or else I wouldn't have noticed this. They have these things, they have these interesting design choices that the owners of the establishments made. They called them Romeo spikes. They're these special spikes that come out of the pillars that essentially were so that the fathers who owned the houses could keep away pirates and buccaneers from climbing up those to get to their daughters. And hence the Romeo spikes, they climb up and then they come down Juliet, is was the joke that the tour guide made. But anyway, Romeo spikes, seek it out. It's real, folks. Fact. But getting into this, like we said, I mentioned, yes, there is a connection to a one Andrew Jackson with the haunted Andrew Jackson Hotel. Beautiful wrought iron balconies. And this is according to Ghost City Tours, as I allowed or mentioned before. Beautiful wrought iron balconies overlook bustling Royal Street, and often enough, street performers are camped out a block or so away. The haunting sounds of blues hang in the breeze just as the soulful voice rocks you back on your heels in awe. The Andrew Jackson Hotel is situated in the heart of the French Quarter amidst all the entertainments and culture the city has to offer. The hotel even has been listed on the National Register for Historic Places since 1965. And although the two-story brick building has existed on the lot since 1890, the history of this old lot of land transcends centuries. Now, I saw this place. It looks like something like, you know, when you go, I don't know if you've ever been, but like to Disney World and you walk down that first area that's like kind of like classic Americana, and it's supposed to be this main street kind of like turn of the 20th century kind of electricity and like, you know, whatever Walt Disney thought was whatever Walt Disney's version of like eugenics influenced kind of white superiority Americana he envisioned for to come. It what I'm basically getting at is that there's this frozen in time feeling, and you get that sense when you see Andrew Jackson Hotel. Oddly enough, I didn't know it was haunted, but when I saw it, and also being a history guy like DangerZone, I immediately took a picture of the front entrance to the hotel, just like, oh, cool, it's called Andrew Jackson. You know, like I wonder if you know the ghost of his dead wife haunts this place or something, like just on my way to go do the tour. um but yeah, it's a beautiful place. It's got a lot of like big trees on the side of it. um and it just like it looks like it's frozen in time, just to give you guys an idea of what it looks like in real life. So there seems to be
That's pretty neat looking hotel, though.
Yeah, it's pretty. There seems to be a residual energy of spirits and ghosts, all of who came before Andrew Jackson, actually. The history of this place is interesting. So it was a boarding school initially. 18th century New Orleans was a bit of disease, death, and oftentimes destitution. I wanted to mention this when we were on our ghost tour. It was all ages, family friendly. I had my youngest with me, and we answered all the questions correctly with our little annoying arid voices. And then the last place we went to, the tour guide asked specifically about the destination we were at, what disease wreaked havoc in the 18th and 19th century. And my youngest raised her hand and she pointed at her and she said, yellow fever. And I smiled ear to ear. She was right. But anyway, especially during the yellow fever, which is why I wanted to mention that, give Cora her flowers there. epidemics that ravaged the city nearly every summer. Childhood mortality rates were exceedingly high, but strangely, it was often the adults who succumbed to the disease. Men between the ages of 15 and 40 were even more susceptible to the grips of yellow fever, almost always certainly dying and leaving their respective families without a head of the household. Ironically enough, if a person managed to survive the bout of yellow fever, which included but was not limited to high fevers, vomiting, chills, jaundice, and liver failure, he or she became immune for life, and thus yellow fever became a rather perverse game of Russian roulette for the thousands of people which it plagued every summer.
Yeah.
Jaundice.
This goes back to like every episode. I feel like disease comes up. I mean, this is that 1830s or whatever. But yeah, dude, or 1700s. When was this? Yeah,
Late
1830s.
18th, 1790s.
Yeah, dude. What a horrible thing, man. I guess the way it felt when you were puking, when you were vomiting, was like sand coming
Mm-hmm.
up. Yeah. Ugh,
Yeah, bro. Yeah, bro. I mean, it doesn't.
horrible.
That's why that book, Guns, Germs, and Steel, is so like important to read because it basically breaks it down into those three. Like, what kinds of resources do you have? What is the disease that's wreaking havoc on the populace, and who's got the firepower? That's what it breaks down to, is like where everybody like wants to be. I mean, look, it needs to be repeated because people need to hear it. I just re-listened recently on this same road trip to the Black Plague series that I love so dearly from last podcast, and they talk specifically about the bubonic plague that basically didn't stop until like 1869 or 1969. I'm sorry, like literally in the 20th century. And they specifically talk about how disease changes the scope of the planet so much in that episode. And realistically, some people forget about it, but mentioning Andrew Jackson, we might as well remind people of how horrible diseases we brought from England to the Native Americans. Guys, we wiped out like over 90% of the Native Americans with disease. Gotta remember that. That is in fucking insane. There's nothing that compares to that as far as like diseases and spreading. Like even the bubonic plague was like 50%. And that was when they were like, God has wrought thine hand upon thee. We are we are the wrong, and yet we come here and the world's first hippies, we just decide to hand blankets to and they're gone. Sorry to depress everybody.
Yeah, rough time when you didn't have vaccines. Shit.
It was. Yeah. No, it's like they're trying to vaccinate me and take away my rights. They did the same fucking thing when we gave people seatbelts. Government's trying to control me, trying to drive around. I'm gonna spill my beer. I put a fucking beer fucking in my lap and in a belt. No way. Fuck that. This ain't America. All right. In 1794, two fires swept throughout the city. The first was smaller, but one account goes as far as to say that the boarding school, originally the boarding school that became the hotel, uh, swayed and shook as a hurricane whirled through the city. So not only do we have Katrina that we know about in the past, like 2000, what was that, 2004, 2005? Um, Several fires, hurricanes, and disease have hit New Orleans. Not to mention the Battle of New Orleans, which we mentioned in a previous episode. There's not much information on the cause of this particular fire, but the second one in December of 1794 was said to have consumed the city and all of its fine structures, including the boarding school itself. Now, there are a few structures that we'll get to later that actually withstood all of these hurricanes and fires, and that's actually part of the mythos behind the specific hauntings. For nearly a century, historians and archaeologists alike have concluded that the boarding school burned in the fiery grips of a citywide fire in 1794. We at Ghost City Tours, according to this article, think there might be more of this story that has thus far been undiscovered or not researched fully. While digging into the Andrew Jackson Hotel's history, the Ghost City Tours came upon something a little strange. An article dated from 1850s lists that the property at 919 Royal Street was one of the few buildings to survive the Great Conflagrations of 1792, when all that portion of New Orleans was devastated. Later, the article goes on to say that when the 1803 Louisiana Purchase, future episode topic, was signed, the property was converted into the federal courthouse, and even up until the time it went in which the article was written, 919 Royal Street underwent very minimal architectural alterations. If this is the case, did a smaller fire perhaps still wreck the boarding school that once existed on this site? And yet, if those reports are to be believed, 5 boys perished in that fire that December, and it seems that the ghosts of those young boys have not left the site in which they have died. So it went on to become a courthouse. Almost immediately after the boarding school reportedly burned down the ground, the site of the Andrew Jackson Hotel became home to the old federal courthouse in New Orleans. To all the Jackson fans out there, know that federal courthouse was the location where General Jackson was indicted for contempt of court when charged with obstruction of justice because he refused to answer interrogation questions. In December of 1814, General Jackson declaring martial law all throughout New Orleans was the modus operandi of the time, I guess. And everybody knows when old Hickory gets mad, fucking martial law time. No one was allowed to enter the city. No one was allowed to leave, though Jackson had only just defeated the British at the Battle of New Orleans, which was not just one battle, but actually 4. On the sprawling field of current day Chalmey, and after which the Brits had dug themselves a canal only to forget their ladders at the start, Jackson prepared for another invasion. He feared the Brits sneaking in, and perhaps his fears were justified, for a naval battle took place on January 19th. But by the time March of 1815 rolled around, it would be safe to say that as a good many people in the city were tired of Jackson's high-handed ways. One man in particular, Louis Loulier, I told you, a bunch of fucking Frenchmen and Spanish running around here. A member of the state legislature anonymously wrote an article in which he completely criticized Jackson's tactics. Naturally, Jackson discovered Lulier's identity and naturally had Lulier imprisoned. I'm surprised he didn't duel him.
I just wanted to hear you say Lulier one more time.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's not fun. Man, I got a Midwest accent for pronunciation. I can't help it. Naturally, Jackson had the judge imprisoned too. You're all in fucking contempt. So Judge Hall was banished from the city of New Orleans on Jackson's orders until the time that the peace treaty was ratified and the Brits had fled Louisiana's coastline. Only then did Jackson release all of his prisoners. This guy that was the judge that was sent away returned, and he was pretty upset with Jackson, demanded that Jackson appear at the courthouse. Jackson, this is interesting, showed up dressed shabbily as a civilian. Though Jackson requested a trial by jury, Judge Hall refused and slapped the general with a $1,000 fine. Though many New Orleans offered to pay Jackson, whom they loved so dearly, he rejected the offer and asked that the people give their money to the widows and orphans of New Orleans who had lost their fathers, husbands, and brothers in the Battle of New Orleans. In 1844, the year before Jackson died, Congress actually ordered that the fine delivered by Judge Hall be repaid to Jackson with interest. He was given $2,700. The courthouse remained on the plot of land, tragically drama-free, as Jackson had moved on to become president until the building was demolished in early 1900s. The structure that is the Andrew Jackson Hotel was constructed in its place. And remember those 5 orphans? Well, supposedly they haunt the establishment. In fact, when I did this Ghost City tour, she's talked specifically about a couple, a family. And now this is all off the internet and just off my description to you, fine folks out there. But essentially, what happened was this family stayed the night, and this was during a time where you would buy disposable cameras, and they went to bed. Not a lot of issues. Um, well, they had used up a lot of the film in the camera, the disposable cameras during the day, taking pictures, French Quarter, la la la, jazz, good food, gumbo, all that good shit. Ran into Gambit, you know, all the Louisiana folk, and then went to bed and woke up, and all the pictures had been taken in their camera. Well, they went home, they got them developed, and it turned out the last couple pictures on that roll of film that were taken were of all of the family sleeping. So, and it was in the position of somebody standing over all their beds. According to the legend, what people perceive or hear, a lot of the orphans that were left there are just bored kids running around. So I suggested maybe just give them some fucking iPads. Maybe they'll just chill out and watch YouTube Kids or some shit. I don't know. That was the Rad Dad suggestion. But these are old timey ghosts, so maybe give them stick and ball or some Tic Tacs. I don't know.
That would be creepy as shit when you go home and get your film developed and see
Just,
like pictures of you and your kids and whoever spouse sleeping.
you ask your wife, you're like, what are you into, like sleep porn now? What's going on? Taking pictures of me? Weirdo?
So that must have been what, in the 90s
Yeah, something like that.
during disposable camera era.
Oh yeah. Did you I don't ever remember a time, even when we were together. I feel like digital cameras were right around like 2003.
Yeah.
And we kind of all just jumped over to that.
I had
Um,
yeah, I had a film camera in Greece, and I still have all the film that I got developed
oh
in the
god, get it
pictures and
burned.
stuff. But
Go burn
yeah,
it. It's all terrible.
when we got to Iceland, though, I got my digital camera, and that's when like all the documentation and evidence of like the debauchery started getting
Way out of hand.
put on film. Yeah, see, that's the problem. Kids never, when we were growing up, nothing was documented. We didn't really start documenting shit until we were adults or in our 20s. So like all
Yeah.
the dumb shit we did in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, I have a distinct memory of being in Iceland when we were stationed there. Folks, listen to our inaugural Danger Zone episode, Navy Memories, and you can hear a more in-depth telling of these tales. But when we were in Iceland, it would have been '04, I think. Um, that Air Force friend of mine that was the drummer guy who I'm friends with, Bill, he I just remember distinctly him coming up to me and being like, have you heard of MySpace? And I'm like, what? And now that's like there's like documentaries about that time period. Like we're on like the like my kids are using shit that I don't even understand. They're like, this is called like like Pose, the app. And I'm like, what's that? And they're like, you take a picture and then it takes a picture and then you send it to one person and then they send like three to you. And like, I'm like, what the, why are you doing that? I don't know. I'm old now, I guess. 41. Fuck. Fuck, we're getting old, man.
Doesn't slow down.
No. All right. Lafayette's blacksmith shop. The building itself was originally started in 1722 and is currently regarded as the oldest structure used as a bar in the United States, according to the official website. A variety of paranormal experiences are associated with the bar, including those who have said to have seen the ghost of Jean Lafayette himself and eerie red eyes that appear from dark corners. TripAdvisor reviews report the building is definitely haunted and is a piece of New Orleans history worth checking out. So, I mean, if you want to go to the oldest bar and see where the sauce was originally given to these pirates and buccaneers and Spanish and Frenchmen, I mean, maybe you'll start talking French in reverse, which I think is just pig Latin. So, Lafayette's
Could
blacksmith
be.
shop.
I saw a picture of that on one of the YouTube videos, or they did like a little segment on it, and
Hmm.
that place looks pretty neat. Is it? That's the one where like the eyes appear in the fireplace,
Yep.
and they like try to get pictures of the little, yeah. But
Yeah.
that place looks really cool as hell.
If you guys are curious, definitely like our Instagram page. We'll post some pictures of these haunted places. Maybe I'll post the Andrew Jackson Hotel pictures I took. St. Louis Cemetery, number one. Now, anybody who's a fan of, say, we'll say they I think it was called Treme. Um, there was a show called Treme on HBO that took place in New Orleans. Or anybody who's seen a movie set in New Orleans has probably seen the um, Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, like those big mausoleum like gravestones that are like
Yeah.
kind of iconic. This is that cemetery. Now, don't hate me, ladies and gentlemen. I went all the way to New Orleans and I didn't go to the cemetery. I had 3 little stowaways with me and I wasn't going to take them that way. I just figured stick to where there's a lot of people and I don't need to go to no cemeteries with some kids. So,
Well, they cut off public access to it apparently, from what I read.
well,
You have to
that makes
get like
sense.
advanced tickets, and because some of the tombs in there get graffitied,
Mm,
more so to do with the like the voodoo stuff, and
yeah.
so they kept having to repair one in particular. Her name was like Marie something. She was the voodoo queen,
Yep.
and they kept going and like drawing X's and stuff on her tomb. So they cut it off from like public access. You have to get like tickets in advance or something.
Um, Marie Laveau.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
But the
she's a figure that you'll see on a lot of New Orleans artwork. Um, she's the paranormal figure with a voodoo queen of New Orleans. Um, she's interesting. There are people that practice voodoo, and there are quite a few little kind of like shops that you can go into like that. My thing again, I was intrigued by that, and my oldest really wanted to. Excuse me, wanted to go to all the spooky stuff like that. Um, that stuff intrigues me, but I'm always a little skeptical to other than like say a ghost tour. And I would easily stay in a haunted hotel. In fact, when Glassfield recorded our album, we stayed in yeah, DangerZone's Rock in the Glassfield shirt. I forgot to mention that. Good man. When Glassfield recorded, we stayed at the hotel that was right next to where H.H. Holmes, the infamous World's Fair Chicago serial killer murder hotel maker, um, while we were there. And it was fun. Like we ran around. I slept like a baby. I didn't really think about anything. It looked more spooky than anything, but like I don't know. Like I got nothing wrong with spirits, and if they're around, like I'm not gonna be, I don't know, unless they're screaming at me like a wild animal in the night or some shit. Um,
just leave them be, and they'll leave you be.
right, exactly. And that's the thing. They're usually more scared of you than you it. So the often referred to the St. Louis Cemetery as the City of the Dead. The cemetery is known for its graves that sit above the ground in a state of disintegration and collapse. The French Quarter official website mentions that the cemetery itself was built in 1789. Um, It is no wonder it falls under one of the most haunted spots in the city, considering it is filled with the bodies of those who lived and loved in New Orleans and whose spirits still wander the hallowed ground in search of respite. Now, we mentioned the flooding and the fires and the disease. The square, the Andrew Jackson Square area where the statue was, supposedly, according to the tour guide too, was the site of mass graves or unburied mass graves. So there were bodies littered in that street, like thousands. And I can only imagine that this place would give off that type of energy. A place like that had seen so much, and from battles to everything. I mean, granted, the battles weren't fought in the city, but still, I mean, like, I I'll tell you this: I'm 15 months dry, but being in that city where legitimately the bars shut down at 5 a.m. and then open at 7 a.m. So like they literally get out a fucking fire hose, blast the vomit off the floor, and then just reopen. Um,
Yeah,
it's
that's wild.
they've got a famous street named after spirits. So I mean, bourbon. Come on. Anyway,
One of the things that I watched earlier was so like during the yellow fever, right? I found this kind of terrifying, but during the yellow fever, a lot of times the people who were really sick, they would fall into a coma, and many times they were just trying to get rid of the dead because there was just so many. And I guess these like corpse wagons would go around the city and just like they'd have somebody say, give us your dead, put your dead in the wagon. And so they would take these corpses and a lot of times they just bury them. Like you said, there's mass graves and stuff, but they would just bury them really quickly. Sometimes like within an hour of them like going into a coma, but back then they didn't know they were in a coma. They thought they just died, right? So they would just bury all these people, and a lot of them came out of their coma while they were buried. And when they started to exhume a lot of the things, they would find a lot of the like scratch marks on the inside. They would find some people. In one case, I was watching, they like ate their fingers and they're like they were eating the flesh off their body because they were like starving to death.
that's some New Orleans eats right there.
I don't know, just creepy as shit.
It
And
is creepy.
that's just a horrible way to like die, man. I can't even imagine.
Yeah. Wow. That's spooky. Spooky stuff, folks. Don't be burying your dead unless they're dead. So, Beauregard Key's house. Several stories circulate about apparitions seen by employees, and the website Very Local New Orleans notes that there is even a binder that holds reports taken by a house director of phantom sightings. A violent shooting that took place in 1908 is said to be another source of spectral unrest on the property. Now, this is interesting. This building, the Ursuline Convent, that was actually where we stopped because specifically the tour guide said that around 3 a.m. there was the spectral sighting of a floating nun who looked down at the ground, because this convent was the home to many nuns, and specifically that these nuns, this nun that they would see would just keep its head down and just float, like literally like it's on its way to work. It's just caught in a weird like spook loop. Um, but this building is gorgeous. It's huge, and I mentioned earlier that some of the buildings, at least a few, like maybe two or three, like the cathedral and the town square and this convent, they withstood the flooding and the fires. Was it God? Or was it ghosts building dams real quick? Who knows? I will say from the looks of it, it looked like there was a pretty firm wall around the convent. And I don't know if maybe I'm just being Mr. Obvious and pointing that out, but It kind of looks sturdy to me. I don't know. But if you take a popular New Orleans ghost tour, such as the Haunted Crawl, another tour you could partake in, you will learn about many strange and haunted destinations in the city, like the Ursuline Convent. The convent is the basis for local vampire lore. That's right. Those fucking fang biting bastards. Oh, in
Is that
fact,
where Red Dead got the idea? Red Dead 2, where you go to Saint Denis and you can do the vampire hunt? Is that
I
where it
mean,
comes
I haven't gotten, dude, I played like 2 hours of that game and I'm like, this is like a goddamn walking simulator and I'm getting bored. But it's a lot of people love it. I need to give it more.
All right, for anybody who's listening that knows what I'm talking about, when you go to Saint Denis, you can hunt a vampire or some shit in the back alley.
Cool. I love that. That's cool. Um, but like there was kind of a thing about vampires when I was there. They were like legitimately there are people living there who say they're vampires. Like no joke, we overheard somebody talking to somebody like off the cuff, like, yeah, I'm a vampire. There's a lot of like hearsay about us, but like blah blah blah. It was weird. Like just get a fucking hobby, dude. You're gonna kill yourself drinking fucking blood. But I mean, I guess, hey, you want to be cool. You listen to a lot of Cure growing up. You smoke jarums. Okay, you're a vampire. So anyway, basis for this local vampire lore, which tells the story of women sent to become brides in the city during the 18th century. The legend says they arrived with casket-shaped chests containing their personal effects and were hence dubbed the Casket Girls. When they were married off, their chests they had left behind were opened, but nothing was found inside. It was believed that they were brought with them with a they had brought with them a fleet of vampires who descended on the city. Many ghost hunters and curious visitors stopped by the convent to observe the third-story shutters, which were said to be nailed shut by holy nails to keep the undead inside. Vampire Casket Girls. Casket Girls is a good name for a song.
Or
I will,
band.
yeah, I will say this was a cool stop. And I don't mean to belittle vampires or people who love this stuff. Like, I'm just as fascinated as you. Like, it is a sight to behold. I saw it at night and it is spooky. Like, this whole area. I mean, there's a fuck ton of drunk people when I was there, and they were all just kind of like, ooh, smoking and just like trying to find a good place to pee. Um, but like the structure of this building again caught in time kind of vibe that I was hoping to see when I went to the French Quarter. It is super surreal and like very there's a sense, there's a feeling that comes over you specifically with the place that I'll get to at the very end of this episode. But this was one of the moments where I was like, wow. But the Ursuline Convent, very interesting, and it's still open. There's still nuns coming and going, and I don't know. Saint Germain House. While the Comte de Saint Germain is known by historians to be a man who lived in the 1700s, local lore knows him as New Orleans' very own resident vampire. That's right. More vampires. It is said he reappeared in the early 1900s under a different name and title, but still very much the same in appearance and personality, and attacked a woman who managed to escape to expose his bloodlust. While details vary, reports of seeing the Count still walking the earth abound, and this popular destination fills people with fear and wonder as they gaze at the dwelling of the undead. Now, this house looks sweet. It's not the biggest house. We'll get to that one.
All these places are like on the corner, and they look similar.
Yeah. Well, do you remember when I told you about
The
the Romeo spikes? You can see the
Yeah.
pillars. Those pillars had those things. Some of them do. Like a few of the places that they're showing, I remember seeing them on there. Like those fucking horny pirates will stop to no end to get that booty.
Yeah, this is the architecture.
The architecture is
The
amazing.
architecture is crazy. Yeah, it looks really neat. I mean, that's stuff that we don't get up here in the Northeast, obviously. This is like
Well,
uniquely New Orleans. New
it
Orleans.
it's that French influence specifically. Like the you can see it in the shutters and all that when you look at the buildings. The Sultan's Palace, this popular New Orleans haunted house, has a gruesome backstory that is more steeped in legend than truth, though the legend might have lured other specters to inhabit the space. According to the stories, a sultan was said to have purchased the house and moved in with a large group of men, women, and children who threw extravagant private parties. According to an article published by ABC, the legend tells of a massacre which saw everyone living there killed horribly and one man buried alive. The stories vary about whether it was the Sultan or his brother who met the most gruesome end, his hands sticking out of the ground, clawing for freedom. While the story has been deemed a terrifying myth, it has solidified this spot as a haunted destination and still boasts some odd paranormal activity in the form of moved or missing objects.
Yep. That one was kind of gruesome too. So there was like I think the count was like 37 people
Mm-hmm.
in the Sultan's Palace that basically just got torn apart one night during a party.
It sounds like they summoned an evil genie or a djinn, a djinn, which is like an evil genie. And then somebody was like, I don't know, like the opening of Wishmaster and turned everybody into gack on the floor.
Yeah.
I don't know. It
If
sounds like a
I,
cool.
if it's true, I mean it's that's got to be one of the biggest mass murders in United States history. That's because, 37, that's quite a bit.
Oh yeah, that's a ton. I was gonna say it's not the worst shooting. I think we left that up to Anders Breivik in Europe. He did that. The worst school attack was actually in Bath, Michigan. Look that up. The Bath school bombing.
When
Somebody
was that?
like taxes. Well, stop taxing us so much, government, is what he said, and kind of what I say. So, the Jemani House, a bar with a tragic backstory. This local spot is another stop along ghost tours in the city, such as the Haunted Crawl. In 1973, the bar was firebombed, according to the official website, and 32 souls were lost due to the incident. At the time, it was the deadliest known attack against the LGBTQ community. Since then, the patrons have heard voices of or felt unseen presences throughout the bar, which provides chills in the form of something other than the cold drinks. Oh boy, that's scary. Don't be
73.
1973, man. That's just after uh what is it? 73, is that Watergate era?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
71, 2,
yeah,
3.
yeah. I'm trying to think of what's going on and like you got
Yeah,
you got
Vietnam.
Vietnam, you got trippy dippy fucking Gerald R. Ford, Grand Rapids zone, hamming it up, falling downstairs like Joe Biden style. Um, I mean, this is essentially, yeah. So Stonewall this would have been before. Okay. Um, yeah, that's a terrible man. history is interesting, and then it's always fucking sad.
It's tragic. There's a lot of topics on this show that are just too tragic.
I know, and it's funny. I thought going from conspiracies to like history would be a little lighter fare, but it's not. The truth is, the nonfiction
Well,
section is always scarier than the fiction section. There's nothing you can do, nothing people can conjure up that's scarier than, well, what we'll get into in a moment about the yellow fever, but go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say, like, it's what you get for doing podcasts about like ghosts and murders and all this gore and ghouls.
Gore
Some
and
rough
ghoul.
stories and
It's a lot of gore
gore
and
and ghoul.
ghouls.
Sorry, I started watching Fallout the other night, so the word ghoul is in my head.
Ghoul. I'm trying to meet a hot single ghoul, if you know what I mean. Yellow fever epidemic in New Orleans, 1817 to 1905. Damn. Perhaps the most gruesome tableaus ever to unfold in New Orleans took place during yellow fever epidemics, which peaked in 1853. 7,849 people died in 1853 from that. 1858, 4,845 deaths. In 1878, 4,046 deaths.
I gotta
Interesting.
believe that that's a
Civil War
pretty
byproduct?
big. Well, the populations weren't as big as they are now back in those 1853, 58, 78. I don't think the population in New Orleans was that large. I mean, obviously it was a city, 100,000, 150,000 maybe. I'd have to wiki it real
Yeah.
quick, but you're talking maybe, 5 to 7% of the population.
Yeah.
That's enormous.
Yeah.
You know,
And they're all
COVID
on top of
didn't
each
even
other.
come close to that. Like
No, 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 no. I mean, yeah. All in all, 41,000 souls would lose their lives to yellow fever in the 19th and early 20th century. The mosquito-borne virus, a member of the Flaviride, Flavidae family, ravaged the populations of immigrants new to the city. In particular, individuals became infected when bitten by a mosquito carrying the virus, so it was easy for multiple members of a household to succumb to the disease. That reminds me, my oldest told me not to kill spiders because they kill and eat the mosquitoes. Spiders are your friends.
I don't kill spiders.
Right. Good. Headaches, muscle soreness, fever, and jaundice, hence the name yellow fever, were followed by liver and kidney failure, hemorrhaging, seizures, coma, and death. Yellow fever cases peaked during warmer months when mosquitoes are most active, and for years, families who had the means to flee during the summers did so. During the worst epidemics, 1 out of every 10 people who stayed behind would die. In 1853, more than 1,000 people died each week. Obviously, civil services were not equipped to deal with mass deaths of that magnitude, but they did what they could. Each day, corpse wagons circled the neighborhoods drivers called Bring Out Your Dead. Mass graves lined the city's perimeter. Fortunately, early 20th century scientists figured out that if they controlled mosquito populations by limiting their breeding grounds, they could control the spread of disease. New Orleans joined forces to close their cistern, drain stagnant pools, and create underground sewage systems. After 1905, yellow fever never once again ravaged the Crescent City, but it still exists in other parts of the world. Oh, brother. Yeah,
Yeah,
mosquitoes
that's
fucking suck. I
yeah.
don't think, I don't,
Mosquitoes and ticks.
I don't think I'm going to get canceled for saying bad shit about mosquitoes or ticks. I mean, I can't think of anything. What can you think of anything positive that comes from? I mean,
No, I fucking
yeah,
hate mosquitoes
I hate
and I hate
mosquitoes
ticks.
too.
I
Fuck.
hate ticks more than anything. No, they're horrible up here where we live.
If you got something good to say about that insect species, write into zanzizi at gmail.com. I would be fascinated to know if there's any worthwhile traits. Um,
Real quick before we move, have
yeah.
you heard about the cicada cicada thing coming this summer?
No, what's that?
Like, obviously, we get cicadas every year, obviously, throughout the country in different pockets. But this year, I read was supposed to be horrible. Like, they're calling for like trillions with a T, tango, trillions of cicadas being hatched on this 17-year cycle. And it's all going to be in like the southeast. So if you're down there, they're saying um, about they're estimating 1 million cicadas per square mile are going to be hatching. You know, they come out of the ground. So I can't even imagine. They're saying throughout like the southeast, Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, South Carolina, there's going to be trillions upon trillions of cicadas. So the swarms and pictures and shit that are probably going to be around this summer. It's just that would suck. You know what cicadas are, right?
Yeah, I'm wondering if there's any way you can like what do you do in that type of an instance when there's like an overpopulation of insects? Do you just slap some chocolate and deep fry them, turn them into fucking circus food? I don't know. Or can we turn them into a fuel source? Can you get them to dance on TikTok? Is there a way to do like a cicada mob or something? I don't know.
I don't know, but
But
I
that
wouldn't want
sounds
to live down.
terrifying if you were like caught in a cloud of that and you can't see, and these things are just like, we're all just babies. We don't know what we're doing.
Yeah, look it up, man. It's just it's going to be bad this year. They're saying worse than usual because
Interesting.
we've had cicada obviously every summer, but apparently this year is going to be bad. When Dane and I were driving through Wyoming, uh, the butterflies. There was these yellow butterflies, millions and millions and millions of them, and
Mhm.
I've never seen anything like it. Going down, was it I-80 or whatever that goes through Wyoming? Same thing, just like clouds of butterflies. You can't avoid them. Your whole car is like a yellow cube from all the butterflies that you hit.
Well, I
Yeah,
mean, they go probably where they're not going to get bothered, but cicadas are not dangerous and can provide some environmental benefits, including cicadas are valuable food source for birds and other predators. Cicadas can aerate lawns and improve water filtration into the ground. Cicadas and nutrients to the soil as they decompose, add nutrients to the soil. So, I mean, I guess maybe farmers will be happy about that, but
yeah, I don't
um,
know.
make sure you insecticide your lawns, I guess, folks. That's been your lawn care update. Now it's time to get into Madame Lalaurie. That's right, folks. If there was a crux, if there was a focus to this ghost tour, it was this spooky house at the very end of the tour. In fact, most of the tours, and we went during spring break, which was like the influx for that because it's like going to New Orleans is perfect during spring break because it's 70s ish. There's no beaches, probably because all the alligators are taking up the beaches, but like temperature temperature wise, you can flip flop, t-shirt, maybe throw on a hoodie at night and just listen to jazz and chill and eat some good old fashioned Cajun cooking. But this is definitely the basis for the tour at the very end, and it really you feel it. Because this is also the biggest property in the French Quarter and now currently owned by some sort of oil magnate who doesn't ever come around there and is very private, but will occasionally throw parties or let people stay there in his spooky haunted, like very haunted. Like some people mediums won't even go in, like supposed mediums and local people refuse to go into this mansion, and we'll get into why. So the Lalaurie house is well known both within and beyond New Orleans city limits. Kathy Bates portrayed Delphine Lalaurie in an episode of American Horror Story, and haunted house attractions frequently include homages to the grisly tale. Lalaurie enslaved African American people because let's not forget that before the Civil War, the South was making them their cotton was being farmed and there were slaves. And well, as if this is an apology for that, there were some sorts of like, you could essentially get in trouble for being a bad slave master. And there were rules and guidelines, not that there was like a slave, I don't know, policeman who came around to inspect to make sure things were being handled, but you could be fined for mistreatment of slaves. And Lalaurie was a notoriously cruel mistress. After a 12-year-old girl fled Lalaurie's bullwhip in terror, falling off the roof and dying from her injuries, the authorities were brought in to investigate. Because cruel treatment to slaves was prohibited by law, Laurie's slaves were taken away from the house and sold at auction. Unfortunately, one of Laurie's friends bought them and gave them back to her. Whether Laurie's famous temper led her to act out in vengeance towards the slaves or whether she was simply insane, no one knows, but the worst was yet to come. Visitors to the Lalaurie house became fewer and fewer as rumors of her cruelty spread and damaged her reputation. In 1834, a cook intentionally set the house on fire, hoping that it would bring civic intervention at best or the relief of death at worst. Think about how bad you got to be being treated that you set the place on fire. You're like, fuck this. I've been a fry cook for long enough, and this McDonald's is going up. I'm just saying, not to equate a slave to somebody working at McDonald's, that's a completely different thing. But to be so miserable that you say, burn this mother down, you can only imagine how cruel this lady was. And like I said, with the information that I've been given and that is kept in records from this time in this era, it's not like there were inspectors or people keeping an eye on. So one can only imagine how cruel this lady was.
And the fact that I don't think this is in your notes, but the cook who set the house on fire, she survived, and she was chained to the stove.
Yep. Yep. Thank you for bringing that up, DangerZone.
Yeah. So she sets the house on fire and survives, but that's just you gotta have a lot going through your head when you make that decision.
Oh yeah. Behind a locked door on the third floor, as firemen arrived and discovered a scene described thusly by the New Orleans Bee on April 11th, 1834. Quote, 7 slaves, more or less horribly mutilated, were seen suspended by the neck, with their limbs apparently stretched and torn from one extremity to the other. These slaves had been confined by the woman Lalaurie for several months in the situation from which they had thus providentially been rescued and had been merely kept in existence to prolong their suffering. Unquote. Damn. So not only were they slaves, but they were being tortured. And somewhere in the range of 20 of them, probably, I think it was actually 19, had died. And there were records of like deaths for slaves. So with her having to pay off fines for being a bad mistress or madam or whatever, like it's, I mean, she essentially murdered and tortured people. She was a serial killer. Subsequent retellings of the story include even more perverse and graphic forms of torture, but the B account is the most reliable version, which I would say probably because you know how the game of telephone goes and things get exaggerated. And I mean, this is a city of spirits and drunks, and I can only imagine. And people who are like, I'm a vampire, which, you know, that's cool, I guess. But what's crazy about all of this and all of this horror that was there, this this bitch escaped in the night, and an angry mob destroyed her home's interior, smashing furniture and ripping out doors and railings before order was restored. The gutted house sat sealed for years and eventually returned to the market. It was purchased by, well, I want to say this before I give away the ending of the kind of, or up to the modern day current. She did try to come back. She went to France and hid out, but she essentially wanted to come back, probably because she was like, I miss my gumbo. I want to come back. I miss my slaves, whatever. But she never did. She died basically never returning. Um, but there were people who were like, "Oh, I saw her. She's on Bourbon Street, you know, gnashing her teeth, looking like a bitch because she was a bitch." Um, but like I said, this house was eventually purchased by actor Nicolas Cage in 2007. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. During the time by which he was arrested twice on Bourbon Street for drunk and disorderly. I want to take his face.
Leaving Las Vegas, man.
Great
Leaving New
movie.
Orleans.
Indeed. Word on the street, though, is that he never dared to spend a night there. And that's it, ladies and gentlemen. That's our Haunted New Orleans episode. A brief tangent down to the Big Easy. A little bit of jazz, a little bit of spooky history, some yellow fever, if you will. Hanging out with DangerZone and Rad Dad. But
Caught in the spook loop.
caught in the spook loop. Watch out for him. But yeah, man, that's been your episode. I wanted to mention and say thanks to everyone who listens to the show, who's checked out the new Glassfield. I really appreciate everybody who's supported that. We're doing great. We got tons more shows coming this year. I just booked a couple more, and not just in Michigan. So there should be some out of state stuff coming up. And yeah, I'm pretty stoked for that. And also, yeah, follow us on our socials, links in the description below. Do you have anything you want to shout out or mention before we wrap this one up, DZ?
Yeah, man, Glassfield, you guys really did it on your last album there. I like it.
Thanks, man. Really did it. Fans of the show will know I reworked a song that we wrote back in the day that's on there. God Complex.
Yeah,
Back when
it's a good one.
back when we used to noodle around. You still got a bass somewhere?
No, I gave it to your brother
Oh, Jesus.
when you guys came out here, remember?
That's true. You're right. We just give it away, but you know what? It's all good.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah,
sweet.
no, there's what?
That was very sweet of you giving that to my brother.
Yeah. No, there's a lot of spooky stories about New Orleans. It was cool. There's a bunch of them we didn't really hit on when you told me you wanted me to do this episode with you. I mentioned it to Danielle, and I just got to give her a quick shout out. She told me a more recent one, and we don't have to talk about it now. Obviously, the show's over, but if you do look it up, 2006, it's a really recent story about a couple named Zach and Addie,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know if you heard anything about it, but it's
Mm-hmm.
it's pretty gnarly. Um, Basically, Zach cut up his girlfriend and put her on a stove, put her on the stove in a bunch of stock pots. This is real shit. Just happened 15 years ago or 18 years ago.
Wow.
But it was above. I thought maybe you might have mentioned it because it was above. They were living in an apartment above Priestess Miriam's voodoo spiritual temple, and now they're saying that this is a modern day, um, like horror story that has produced some apparitions that people are now saying are these folks.
Wow. I do know that the homicide solved ratio percentage is 22% in New Orleans. So there's there was a recent interview with Andrew Callahan talking about his time living in the French Quarter, and like he would do all these man on the street reports, and this guy was like, "Yeah, I just shot a dude down on fucking State Street. Post this, tag me on TikTok." He's like, "No, no, 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 no. You killed somebody." Yeah. Like people just it's a scary, I mean, cover your drinks, walk responsibly, folks. Don't get caught in the spook loop. Maybe we'll do an added bonus on some of the stuff that we might have missed. If you have a suggestion, please email us at zanzizi.podcast@gmail.com. Follow us on Instagram, like and rate and review and share. Other links in the description below. Thank you for listening to the episode. We love you. We'll see you next time. Have a great one.